Alright, let's dive straight into it. The stolen soul. This idea isn't just some far-off philosophy, it's a direct hit on how we've been taught to understand our own lives, our souls, and what the truth might really be. So, what does On the Origin of the World say? This ancient Gnostic text, banned by the Church and left out of the mainstream Bible, flips our idea of creation upside down. It tells us that when our souls entered this world, something essential was stolen from us, our knowledge of who we really are and where we come from. Here's the wild part: this wasn't an accident. According to the Gnostics, this world we're in isn't a gift from a loving God. Instead, it's a trap set by a lesser god, or Demiurge, whose main goal is to keep us blind, ignorant, and, most importantly, obedient. Now, when we talk about the Demiurge, we're not talking about some minor, forgettable character in a myth. The Demiurge is portrayed as the architect of the physical world, a powerful entity, but flawed, with an ego that craves worship and control. And get this, the Gnostics didn't see the Demiurge as a loving creator. They saw it as a cunning warden, a jailer who has imprisoned us here in the material world. This is an entity that doesn't want us to know our own origin, let alone escape. So, what's the game plan of this cosmic thief? The Demiurge not only created the physical world to trap us, but also wiped our memories, stealing our sense of divine identity and replacing it with fear, desire, and a constant hunger for material things. The Gnostics believed that when we came into this world, we were essentially stripped of our Gnosis, a profound, intrinsic knowledge of the divine realm we came from. And without that, we're like amnesiacs wandering around, desperately trying to fill a void we don't even understand. It suggests that all the things we chase, success, status, validation, are distractions designed to keep us locked in this cycle, searching for meaning in things that never truly satisfy. Think about it, why does nothing ever seem to be enough? Why, even after achieving our dreams, do so many of us feel empty, like something critical is still missing? The Gnostics would say that's because our souls were meant for something far greater, but that knowledge was taken from us. And here's where things get even more disturbing. The Demiurge didn't just trap us in the physical world, it also gave us bodies, a brilliant design choice, really. Our bodies are like anchors that tie us down with pain, pleasure, and endless needs. Hunger, sleep, lust, fear, these are chains that keep us focused on survival, not enlightenment. It's a distraction factory, 24/7. Think about how much of our lives are spent catering to the body's demands. The Gnostics saw this as no accident. They believed the body was designed specifically to keep us from accessing any hint of our true origin. Now, this might sound bleak, but according to Gnostic thought, it's not hopeless. There's a way out, Gnosis, or knowledge. But here's the kicker: knowledge in this sense doesn't mean reading a book or following a guru. It's not about finding some hidden scroll buried in a desert. Gnosis is a direct, internal realization of the divine truth that has been obscured. It's a remembering of who we are beyond the physical, beyond the lies, beyond the manipulation of the Demiurge. But if that's the escape route, it's no wonder why this knowledge has been suppressed for centuries. The idea that we can wake up and escape this prison is a serious threat to any authority that profits from keeping us asleep. On the Origin of the World and other Gnostic texts were declared heretical, hunted down, and erased from mainstream teaching. And why? Because they dared to suggest that the world as we know it is a prison, our bodies are the bars, and those in power have every reason to keep it that way. So, what are we left with? A world that is meticulously designed to keep us blind to our true nature. A world ruled by an entity whose very existence depends on our ignorance. And a text that, though banned and hidden away, offers a tantalizing glimpse of the truth that could change everything if we dare to see it. No wonder it was banned. Why would the Church work so hard to hide this knowledge? We're talking about texts like On the Origin of the World, the Gospel of Thomas, and the Gospel of Mary, texts that were labeled as heresy, confiscated, and erased from mainstream religious teaching for centuries. These aren't just minor texts, they offer a radically different perspective on God, humanity, and what the soul's purpose might truly be. And if we're being honest, the ideas they contain would shake the very foundation of traditional belief. See, these banned texts present a version of God that's unrecognizable compared to the conventional view. They expose layers of authority and power that seem designed to keep humanity in a cycle of ignorance and submission. From a Gnostic perspective, organized religion isn't simply about worshipping a divine creator. Instead, it can be seen as a structure that reinforces the prison of the material world, keeping people tethered to a cycle of dependency, guilt, and fear. If people started to believe in the Gnostic view that we each carry a spark of the divine, a hidden truth that connects us to a reality beyond this world, it would undermine religious institutions' roles as gatekeepers to God. Suddenly, there'd be no need for intercessors, rituals, or dogmas to reach divinity. Consider how power works. It's maintained through control and through limiting access to certain truths. If you remove the Gnostic idea of a hidden God behind the material world, a God that is unknowable, beyond the Demiurge's creation, then the whole system of external salvation falls apart. Gnostic texts suggest that each person has the power to connect to this hidden divine realm through inner knowledge or the Gnosis. And that's a huge threat to any institution whose power is based on telling people they need to earn salvation through obedience and mediation. The Church didn't just ignore these texts, it actively sought them out, destroyed them, and labeled their followers as heretics. This was a strategic move. By monopolizing what was considered sacred, the Church was able to shape a single narrative, one that puts a deity of absolute power at the top and people in positions of compliance at the bottom. Any alternative worldview that pointed to divine autonomy, that suggested people might have the power to awaken to their true nature outside of this hierarchical system, had to be eliminated. The burning of Gnostic texts, the persecution of Gnostic communities, these weren't just random acts of suppression. They were intentional moves to control the narrative, to establish a monopoly on spiritual truth. If you convince people that salvation only comes through an external authority, they remain loyal, fearful, and ultimately controllable. If we think about it, this isn't just a story about ancient books and theological battles, it's about power. These banned ideas weren't suppressed because they were false, they were suppressed because they were dangerous. They questioned authority, they promoted self-empowerment, and they dared to suggest that divinity wasn't just a privilege for the few at the top, but a birthright for everyone. Now, let's get into the idea of the divine trap, a concept that paints this world in a way that's hard to swallow, but even harder to ignore once you see it. We're talking about a structure that's not here to liberate us, but to keep us bound. The key here is this: Gnostic texts describe the material world as a prison, not a paradise. It's meticulously crafted to keep souls locked into a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, and this isn't just metaphorical. This cycle, this endless loop, is meant to keep us busy, chasing things that ultimately mean nothing in the grand scheme. We're constantly on the hunt for meaning, status, relationships, possessions, but Gnostic thinkers would argue that these pursuits are traps, distractions designed to keep us from realizing our true, divine origin. Let's break down how this trap functions. In Gnostic thought, this isn't about punishment or testing, as mainstream theology might suggest. It's about power and containment. The material world is full of desires, needs, and suffering, which pull our focus entirely outward. When you're constantly looking to fulfill basic needs or satisfy endless cravings, there's no time or headspace to question the nature of your reality. And that's the real genius behind the trap. It's not an iron cage. It's a cycle of distractions that feel like freedom but are anything but. Consider how much of our lives are dedicated to things that, in the end, keep us anchored to this physical realm. Our bodies, with their endless demands, function like the perfect tether. Hunger, pain, pleasure, they ground us in a constant struggle for survival and comfort. We're programmed to seek satisfaction in a world that, by design, can never truly satisfy. That's not a coincidence, it's part of the structure. The Gnostics saw this as an elaborate trick, make the soul so enmeshed in the material that it forgets it's even trapped. Now, why would anyone set up such a system? Because, in the Gnostic view, as long as we are focused on this endless cycle, we're unable to connect with our own divine spark, our Gnosis. This knowledge, this awakening to our true nature, is the one thing that could set us free, and that's exactly why it's buried under layers of physical and emotional distraction. Every part of this system, from the body's needs to the social structures around us, feeds into this trap. We're raised to value success, relationships, material wealth. We're taught that these are the markers of a fulfilled life. But what if those markers are actually the bars of our cage? It's not just the physical body that binds us, it's the entire culture built around it, reinforcing the idea that fulfillment is always something external, something just beyond our reach. Let's talk about the Demiurge, the so-called architect of this material world. Here's where things get even more intense. The Gnostics didn't see this creator as the benevolent deity many traditions portray. Instead, they describe the Demiurge as a deeply flawed being, one that's ego-driven, controlling, and obsessed with power. This being, in Gnostic thought, isn't some omniscient, all-good god. It's a force that rules through deception, demanding worship and obedience as a way to keep us bound to this material plane. So, who, or what, is the Demiurge, really? The Gnostics envisioned it as a being with enough power to craft the physical universe, but lacking the wisdom or goodness to guide it meaningfully. In fact, the Demiurge is often depicted as arrogant, mistakenly believing itself to be the supreme creator. Imagine that, a deity who's not only limited but deeply ignorant, fully convinced it alone is God. The Gnostic texts present the Demiurge as blinded by its own ego, unable to recognize that it's merely a fragment of a much greater cosmic truth. The Demiurge is not alone. It's supported by lesser entities known as the Archons, a kind of cosmic bureaucracy that keeps this flawed system running smoothly. These Arkans act like enforcers, maintaining the rules of this reality and ensuring souls remain ignorant of their true, divine nature. They thrive on chaos, confusion, and the fear that keeps people from looking beyond the material world. This hierarchy, led by the Demiurge, isn't about enlightenment, it's about control, plain and simple. The Demiurge rules by instilling a sense of limitation, a belief that what we see is all there is. Through a combination of religious dogma, social conditioning, and endless distractions, this system ensures we rarely, if ever, question the fundamental nature of reality. When you're told from birth that the material world is the ultimate truth, that success and survival are life's highest goals, it creates a mental prison as real as any physical one. But here's what makes this concept so profound: if the Demiurge isn't the true creator, if it's merely a pretender enforcing a reality of limitation, then everything we think we know about existence could be a deception. The Gnostics viewed this as the ultimate betrayal, being led to believe that the entity demanding our worship and devotion is the source of life itself, when, in fact, it's the architect of our spiritual imprisonment. Alright, now we're moving into one of the most intriguing and unsettling aspects of this whole concept: the world as an illusion. The material world is not only a trap, it's an intricate illusion that keeps us from recognizing any deeper truth. And this illusion isn't just about physical reality, it's woven into every level of our experience, from what we see and feel to the very thoughts we think. The idea here is that this world is carefully designed to keep us distracted, focused on the temporary and superficial, so we never look beyond. So, what exactly is meant by illusion in this context? We're not talking about a simple trick of light or a magician's sleight of hand. In the Gnostic worldview, the entire material realm is set up to convince us that it's all there is, that physical existence is the only thing that matters. And it's a convincing setup. We feel pain, we experience joy, we crave material success. But, according to these ancient teachings, it's all a facade, a construct designed by the Demiurge and his Arkans to keep us bound to the material, away from our spiritual essence. One of the key elements of this illusion is the idea of identity. Think about it: from birth, we're shaped and molded by societal norms, familial expectations, and cultural beliefs. We're given a name, a role, a nationality, a religion, and are taught to identify with all these external factors. This creates a strong sense of self based entirely on things outside our core being, things that, ultimately, are temporary and ever-changing. The Gnostics believed that this attachment to a false sense of self is exactly what the Demiurge wants. When we're fixated on these external identities, we're less likely to search within, to question who we really are beyond these labels. And it doesn't stop there. The illusion extends into our daily lives through a relentless pursuit of material gains, pleasure, and distractions. Society tells us that we need to acquire things to be happy: money, property, status. It's a cycle of consumption and desire, always pushing us to chase what's just out of reach, keeping us looking outward rather than inward. This isn't a coincidence in the Gnostic perspective, it's an intentional design meant to keep our minds anchored to the material, to the things we can see and touch, so we don't explore beyond the veil. The Gnostics saw suffering itself as part of the illusion. In a typical religious view, suffering is often seen as a test, something to endure for spiritual growth. But in Gnosticism, suffering is part of the trap. It's meant to keep us engaged with the material world. When we suffer, when we face loss or pain, we're more likely to cling to what we know, to find comfort in material things or familiar routines. Suffering keeps us entangled in the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, as we constantly seek to alleviate the pain of existence by grasping onto things that ultimately don't last. And it goes even deeper. The very thoughts we think, the emotions we feel, these, too, can be part of the illusion. Gnostics believed that the mind could be manipulated, that thoughts of fear, envy, or insecurity were often implanted by Arkans to keep us in a state of conflict and distraction. When we're consumed by these emotions, we are far less likely to question the world around us. Instead, we become wrapped up in our own issues, our fears, our ambitions, and we never consider that there might be more to existence than the material reality we perceive. So, if everything we see, feel, and think is potentially a part of this illusion, how can we ever hope to see beyond it? For the Gnostics, the answer was a practice of deep introspection, a pursuit of gnosis, or self-knowledge, that transcends intellectual understanding. They believed that to escape the illusion, one had to awaken a form of inner knowing that recognizes the material world as temporary and deceptive, and the self as something far greater than the body, mind, or personal identity. In other words, breaking free from the illusion means realizing that our true nature is something entirely separate from what we've been taught to believe. But here's the kicker: to reach this state of awareness requires a level of questioning and self-exploration that most of us are conditioned to avoid. Now we're diving into something that feels like it's right out of a sci-fi thriller, but with stakes way higher: the Archons, these mysterious, unseen forces that Gnostic texts describe as cosmic enforcers of the illusion. If the Demiurge is the architect of this material world, then the Archons are the hands-on operators, making sure the whole system runs smoothly and that we stay right where we are, distracted, confused, and locked into the physical. Who or what are these Archons? The Gnostics didn't view them as some random spirits or minor deities. These entities are specifically tasked with maintaining order within the trap, enforcing the rules of this material realm. The Archons are described as beings that operate behind the scenes, subtly manipulating our thoughts, fears, and desires to keep us from glimpsing the truth of our existence. It's a system of control that works in layers, through cultural norms, psychological conditioning, and even within our own minds. Let's break down how the Archons work on a day-to-day level, because according to Gnostic teachings, they aren't just passive bystanders, they're actively involved in keeping humanity spiritually asleep. Their main tactic? Distraction and distortion. They plant seeds of fear, doubt, and envy within us, emotions that keep us spinning, focused on each other or our own insecurities rather than questioning the bigger picture. The Archons thrive on the conflicts they generate, whether they're societal, personal, or even internal. Every time we're caught up in envy, shame, or hostility, we're less likely to step back and question the deeper nature of our existence. And it doesn't stop at emotions. The Archons are also said to manipulate our very perception of reality. They create false lights, things that appear meaningful but are ultimately hollow. Think about the endless pursuit of external validation, the obsession with image, power, or approval from others. These are like shiny objects dangled in front of us, distracting us with things that seem important in the moment but leave us feeling empty. According to Gnostic thought, these pursuits are not accidental, they're part of a carefully constructed system to keep us engaged in the shallow and the fleeting. Now, here's something that makes this concept even darker. The Archons, as described by the Gnostics, don't simply feed off our ignorance, they actually gain strength from our emotional energy, especially the lower, more chaotic forms of it. When we're locked in cycles of fear, anger, or despair, it's said that we emit a kind of energy that fuels these entities. It's a cycle that feeds itself. The more we suffer, the more powerful the Archons become, and the more they can manipulate our world to create even more suffering. This isn't just about control, it's about harvesting human energy to maintain a system of spiritual oppression. The Arkans are thought to have unique ways of infiltrating different aspects of our lives. From the Gnostic perspective, they are woven into the very fabric of human institutions. They influence governments, religious organizations, and societal norms, not to create harmony, but to perpetuate division and dependency. Imagine systems that thrive on hierarchy, fear of punishment, or reward-based compliance, all structures designed to keep individuals focused on external authority rather than inner truth. This is exactly the kind of setup the Arkans are believed to use, as it prevents people from looking inward and discovering their own power. And while this all sounds like something out of dystopian fiction, it also has a strangely familiar ring. Think about how our society functions through constant consumption, endless entertainment, and deep-seated competition. The Arkans' influence isn't some outlandish conspiracy, it's a reminder of how entrenched systems of control can operate under the radar, feeding on our energy and keeping us focused on everything but our inner selves. What's most chilling, though, is how subtle the Arkans' influence is. They're not openly coercing us, they're programming us to follow patterns that keep us in a state of distraction and dependency. We're talking about a system that doesn't just control behavior but shapes beliefs, values, and identity itself. If you accept that life is about survival, achievement, and external validation, you're less likely to question why these are the values society prioritizes in the first place. And that's the genius of the Arkans' control. It feels so normal, so universally accepted, that most people don't even think to question it. To put it simply, the Arkans are like the hidden operators of a massive psychological and spiritual maze. They keep us running in circles, chasing illusions, and fulfilling roles that ultimately serve to keep us locked into a lower level of consciousness. Gnostic texts warn us of this precisely because they saw breaking free from this cycle as our ultimate purpose. For them, the realization of our true essence, our divine spark, is the one thing that disrupts the Arkans' power. But as long as we remain unaware, caught up in the endless cycle of striving and suffering, the Arkans' grip remains as tight as ever. The one thing that the Arkans, the Demiurge, and this entire cosmic system of control desperately want to keep from us, Gnosis, true knowledge. Gnosis isn't just intellectual understanding, it's a profound, transformative awareness that transcends words and ideas. This knowledge, according to the Gnostics, is not about knowing facts or figures, but recognizing a deeper, hidden truth about our own divine nature. And here's the kicker, it's a truth that doesn't come from any external authority, institution, or doctrine. It's something we awaken to within ourselves. Gnosis is about seeing through the illusion, breaking free from the layers of deception that have been placed around us since birth. Think of it like waking up from a dream. Everything seems real until that moment you realize it was all in your head. This awakening is what the Gnostics pursued, a complete shift in perception where the world of material distractions and superficial identities falls away, and a higher, spiritual reality comes into view. This is the moment the Gnostics described as remembering. They believed that every soul holds a spark of the divine, a piece of a greater cosmic reality that's been obscured by the noise of this world. So how do we reach Gnosis? The Gnostics didn't believe it was a process you could follow in a single, linear way. It's not a path you walk, it's a transformation that happens within. Some people might find glimpses of it in deep contemplation, others through profound experiences or revelations that shake them out of their normal way of seeing. Gnosis is deeply personal, unmediated by institutions or intermediaries. This is why it's so threatening to systems of control, because it's an empowerment that no one can grant or take away. It's a knowledge that liberates the individual from dependency on anything external. Gnostic texts often speak of inner practices as keys to this awakening. Meditation, self-reflection, and even questioning the very nature of reality are ways to start peeling back the layers of illusion. But unlike many religious practices, Gnostic methods aren't about obedience or submission. They're about breaking down the boundaries of the mind and freeing oneself from the mental prisons that the Arkans are believed to have set up. For the Gnostics, questioning everything was essential, even questioning the concept of God as we know it, the nature of good and evil, and the validity of what we're told to believe. One of the most potent symbols for this journey is the spark, that hidden essence within each person that connects us directly to the divine source. They saw this spark as indestructible, no matter how deeply buried it might be beneath the illusions of the world. This divine spark is immune to the Demiurge and Arkans, but to access it, we have to consciously turn inward, to recognize and nurture it. And once this spark is ignited, it cannot be extinguished. It's a light that guides the soul beyond the boundaries of the material world. So, why is Gnosis so revolutionary? Because it's the one thing that can truly set us free. In the Gnostic view, external knowledge, knowledge of laws, rituals, societal values, is limited and often serves the agenda of control. But inner knowledge, self-knowledge, is what breaks the chains. It's a shift from seeing oneself as a passive being to an active seeker, a soul with the power to navigate its own path to liberation. This doesn't mean rejecting the world or renouncing everything material, but rather recognizing these things for what they are, temporary, part of the illusion. The goal isn't to escape life, but to live with a full awareness of who we are beyond it. Now, imagine a world where everyone reached this level of self-knowledge. A world where people recognized the illusion set up by the Demiurge and Archons and understood their true, divine nature. This is the vision the Gnostics had, a collective awakening where humanity could transcend the limitations imposed by this realm and reconnect with the divine source. They believed that such an awakening would dissolve the power of the Archons, break the grip of the Demiurge, and create a reality rooted in truth rather than deception. Gnosis, then, isn't just an individual quest, it's a revolutionary act. It's the ultimate resistance against a system that thrives on ignorance and division. In pursuing Gnosis, one defies the constructs designed to keep us spiritually small and reclaims their birthright to know, to question, and to seek something beyond the material. It's the freedom to look within and find that the answers we need aren't hidden in some distant place but are already a part of us, waiting to be uncovered. And with that, we wrap up this journey through Gnosticism and the deep, transformative power of Gnosis. Thanks for watching, for sticking with me to explore this complex, fascinating worldview that dares to challenge everything we've been told. Remember, knowledge, especially self-knowledge, is the key to freedom. So keep questioning, keep seeking, and who knows, maybe you'll start seeing the world a little differently. Thanks again for being here, and I'll catch you in the next video.